they're not allowed to do any work. That was their ruling at their time, and the Jews still practice that today. Even they're not allowed to flick on a light switch. Even today, they turn on their lights on Friday before sunset, and they leave them on. They don't drive any cars, candles, whatever it might be, but today they don't even press the button to cross the road. You know, it's got the green and red sign for the human being to cross. They don't even press, they do nothing. That's how it was back in the day. So every Saturday, that's when they'd see the fish in the bay. And so what they did was, Allah said, Saturday's off. Don't do anything on Saturdays. Don't do anything on Saturdays. Don't do anything on Saturdays. And then what they did, they couldn't catch the fish, so they put their nets out on Fridays, and they collected them on Sundays. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they kept on doing it. And so there was 3 groups of people. One group of people who fished, knew it was wrong, and didn't care. There was a second group of people. The second group of people, they told the first group that were fishing it's wrong, but they still associated with them. They still didn't by disassociating themselves with them, let them know that that's wrong, or we don't agree with what you're doing, by taking a stand, boycott, if you might call it that. And the third type of people, right? The third type of people, who are the people that did the right thing. They told the first group, don't fish. It's against the law. God's told you, Allah's told you, don't do that. And they kept on, they didn't listen, so they left the area. They left that town, that qarya, that area where they were transgressing the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the last point of Amr Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar. That's the last, when people are not listening, what's going to happen? When people don't listen to Allah, the punishment's going to come. Right? The reckoning is going to occur. And if a good, and this is what happened, so they left, the punishment of Allah came, the first and second groups, even though the second group did not partake in the fishing, but they didn't follow the conditions of enjoining good and forbidding evil, because they still associated with them, they still traded with them, they still were, socializing with them. That both of those two groups, Allah turned them into pigs and monkeys. And the third group that left, they were the only ones that were saved. Okay, so you might hear some people say about the Jews, they're the children of monkeys and pigs. That's not true, because they died out. The destruction is, imagine if they kept on going, and those evil, so to speak, genes, or that evil will keep going. The evilness will continue. So that it's not true when they say that. It's not. They're not the children of apes and pigs, but it's a kind of a diss, so to speak, that some people use, Muslims. But don't say it, because that's not the reality. And we as people of truth, we don't talk about the things that are not true. We don't perpetrate and perpetuate falsehood in any way, shape or form against anyone, because it's oppressive in that way. Okay? So that is the essence of it. That story in the Qur'an is the essence of enjoining good and dissuading evil. That has the rules of it, it has how it works and how it doesn't work. And there's a hadith of the Prophet of ﷺ, he said, there's two sets of people on a boat. One is on the upper deck, one is on the lower deck. The people of the lower deck, they're thirsty, they want water. So what do they say? They say, let's drill a hole in the hull of the boat so we get some water. And the hadith continues. This is a practical hadith, so that we can understand into the most simple and basic element of what it means to call for reality, call to truth, call to ma'ruf, all that which is good, and dissuade from munkar and all that which is evil, in all its forms, So the hadith continues that if the people on the upper deck didn't stop the people on the lower deck from drilling a hole in the hull of the ship, what's going to happen? And who's going to die? Everyone's going to drown, or at least not make it back to where the ship's going to sink. Right? So it's incumbent on those that know to propagate, or to encourage, or to teach, or to mentor, counsel those who don't know. And again, that's the other essence in terms of the counsel aspect of it, of al-Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar. And the practical application of it is in the story of Bani Israel and the fishing on the Friday to the Sunday. If you keep in mind these two aspects of it, you'll understand what it means to be the one who enjoins good and forbids evil. You'll understand that. So the verbal sense is everyone's going to drown, everyone's going to be destroyed in that sense, or die, or be killed, or be harmed if the ones that know don't, at least tell the ones that don't know, and then prevent them from doing that. And in the practical instance of it, first step is to tell them. Second step is to boycott. If that doesn't work, then one must leave. One must disassociate themselves. So if you have a bunch of friends on a practical level, if you have a bunch of friends that are smoking marijuana, for example, or drinking alcohol, all right, and you like them, they're great people, and then they're Muslims, by the way, because the application is to Muslims in the first instance. If a person is a non-Muslim, لا ذنب بعد الكفر, the ulama say. There's no sin after kufr. So if they're not Muslim, then different. That doesn't mean that we don't encourage people to do the right thing. And we spoke about that last week as well. Irrespective of what their faith is, we still encourage people to do the right thing. But you can't say the Qur'an says it's haram. You can't use those kind of evidences to talk to someone who's not a Muslim. You can't. You have to talk on a social level, a psychological level, a practical level, a criminal level, for example, a level of ethics and morality, so that you can still dissuade the evil, because we don't want to see evil perpetrated in any form to any person. That's where the exact opposite of that. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The Prophet of Allah ﷺ was only sent as mercy to humankind. And we're the emulators of the Prophet ﷺ in that way, so we should be mercy in all its forms manifested, inshaAllah, on this earth. So, when we deal with the Amr Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar, now we have the keys. Now we have the keys. The verbal aspect of it and the physical aspect. After the boycotting, your friends, the example of the friends and they're smoking marijuana, you love them, maybe they're your relatives, they're your friends from 20 years, they're your brother or sister, whoever it might be. So you go there and you see the first time, they say, let's go and watch a movie, or we'll come over and, is that Netflix and still chill, or is that Netflix and chill still, or is it over, is that something else now? Whatever it is that everyone's doing, and then all of a sudden someone pulls out the marijuana or the alcohol or whatever, they start drinking. Or at the first occasion, you're a bit shocked and you don't know what to do. They invite you again. The second occasion, you say they're all Muslims again. They're all Muslims. Non-Muslims is a different scenario. All right, they're all Muslims. And then you say, look, brother, sister, whatever, this is no good, whatever the case might be, And you go there again, same thing. Well, the third time you have to leave before the movie starts. The second time when you're telling them, maybe you affect them somehow. Maybe you might watch the movie. But the third time, unfortunately, you can't be associated. So that's the boycott. And if they call you again, then that's your differentiating yourself. That's leaving. So the boycott is to leave while the movie's running. So if you guys are going to smoke, marijuana, I'm not going to be, or drink alcohol, whatever it might be, I'm not going to be associated with yourselves. Then if they call you again, or no one calls, do they anymore? They whatever, Snapchat, even you talk to each other through Snapchat, all right? If it's Snapchat each other, then whatever way of communicating that we communicate these days, right? And then you gotta let them know. You can't just say, oh, I'm busy. It's not good enough, because that's not Amr Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar, is it? So you have to say, something along the lines of, I really love you, you're my good brother, friend, sister, whatever it was. Hopefully not boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is. Okay, and I love you a lot, or whatever, and you know my position on this. My position is only what the Prophet said and what Allah said. And look, as long as you guys are still doing that, I'm not involved with you anymore. I don't want to be involved with you. Even if you invite me to something which is not involved in that. So they're going to invite you, let's say invite you to the mosque, all right, or Dars Deen, or Taraweeh, or something. That's a different thing altogether. Let's say they invite, I'm having a barbie and I'm not going to smoke. Well, no, sorry. Until I know that you're staying away from that thing, I'm not going to associate with you. Okay? So that doesn't mean that you hate the person. No. It doesn't mean you want to stone the person, or hang the person, or behead the person, or lash, or whatever, disgrace them on Facebook, or whatever it is these days. That doesn't mean any of that. The opposite. That if you're truly a caller to Allah, and truly your intention is to enjoin good and forbid evil, what? Whichever of you, whomsoever of you sees an immoral, an indecent thing, for they should change it, not mention it. No, so what if you mention it? That's easy to do. But to change it, how? Firstly, with one's tongue, and if they can't, then with one's hand. Firstly, that's for if you're in charge, if you're the manager, if you're the sultan, if you're the ruler, then with your hand. If you're the dad, the mum, whatever, over the children, that's a different scenario. Husband over the wife in that situation, wife over the children, dad over the children, the family. Okay? If you're not able to do that, then with your tongue. Specifically, that's for the ulama. They have to be on that all the time. And generally, forever has whatever knowledge they have. If you know that drinking is haram, you have to say it. You may not know what other things are haram, but you know as a fact. You heard it from one of the scholars. Then you have to say. And then thirdly, with the heart. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ بِالْقَلْبِ. And what does that mean? At the least is dua. So you need to make dua for these people. Not just want to destroy them. Not want them to be wiped off the face of the earth. Not insult them by calling them this or that. That's not the prophetic way. Unfortunately, that's the shaitanic way. Or the satanic way. Not the prophetic way. So, if you're not making that dua for them, and it doesn't mean that you can't at some stage invite them to the mosque, or to a dars, or to whatever. But on a social level, there has to be a disassociation, and they have to know why. They have to know the reason why. And then later on they call you up and they say, oh look, thank you, or maybe hopefully they'd be that, that enlightened at some stage, say, oh look, alhamdulillah, I've given up that bad habit, and look, we'd like to hang out. Then it's a different story. Okay, then it's a different story. So, that is the essence of al-amr bil-ma'ruf wal-nahy al-munkar. That is the essence of it. And as I said now, with those two, with that hadith and with that verse of the Qur'an, in terms of the story about the people of Bani Israel, that Allah Azza wa Jalla turned them into apes and pigs, understand now, they don't really need much more than that. Really, you don't need except the knowledge to be able to do it. Except the knowledge. And alhamdulillah, we're going through that with Imam al-Haddad's book as we go through the different chapters. And inshallah Azza wa Jal, that as we do that, we'll get that greater understanding. So he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described the believers in different, if you don't mind reading in English, because
which one?
It's from the beginning where you read from last time.
In many contexts has God attributed enjoining good and forbidding evil to the believers. On some occasions, even before attributing faith to them, and on others, before mentioning the regular performance of prayer and giving of zakah.
Jazakallah khair. So, that's how important it is. That's what the Imam's trying to highlight. That this aspect, because in essence, if the society is a righteous society, the individuals within that society will be a product of that society, meaning they'll also be righteous. And if the society is a fasida society, a corrupted society, subhanahu wa ta'ala, then more than likely the individuals that are raised in that environment, in that society, will also be corrupted. So that's the importance of the ummah, so to speak. And I don't mean the ummah just the Muslims. The ummah, whoever came after the Prophet ﷺ, whoever was alive after the Prophet ﷺ received the risala, they're part of the ummah. Doesn't matter what their faith is. They're ummah al-da'wah. If they're Christians, Jews, whatever, agnostics, atheists, whatever it might be, they're ummah al-da'wah. Da'wah. Right? They're the ummah that we're calling to Allah. And then ummah al-ijaba, we accepted the invitation, they're the Muslims. Those who believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, they're ummah al-da'wah. So that's why they're all part of the ummah. We don't make that differentiation. We don't make that only when it comes to prayers and when we do Salat al-Janazah, if someone passes away, and when they're buried and marriage and those inheritance and these types of things. But in our dealings with people, we don't make that we don't make that difference. And then he says that those that were cursed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those that disbelieved from Bani Israel, from what Dawood alayhi salatu wasalam said, and what Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, because they rejected him. They unfortunately they have a habit, unfortunately, and like I said, it's nothing against anyone personally. This is what the doctrines teach. This is what the Qur'an teaches. And even the Bible teaches that. Even the Bible teaches that about Bani Israel, that they rejected their prophets. They killed their prophets when Allah Azza wa Jalla, like Yahya alayhi salam, John. He was killed by Bani Israel. They didn't want him there. He's a burden for them. They don't want to have to listen to him and follow what he says. They want to do their own thing. Right? So, unfortunately, like I said, that's the reality, and that's what our faith says, and that's what we follow because we believe in all these things. That they went against their prophets. And so when a person goes against their prophet, they're going against Allah. And when a person goes against Allah, they face that punishment. Because they disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they created enmity between themselves, between the prophets and themselves. Okay, and they didn't leave the things they were told to leave. Sami'na wa asayna. Isn't that what the classic call is? We hear and we disobey. Whereas the reality of those who give themselves up for Allah and the Prophet of Allah, والسلام, they sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. That's the difference. And he says, and what they did is the worst of all deeds. What does it say? The last part of the verse. لَبِئْسَ مَا كَانُوا يَفْعَلُونَ.
Indeed, evil is what they used to do.
Right? And bi'sa is the worst kind of type of evil. Because that's it, they're creating doubt. Once they start changing, they're making people leave the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah created humankind, to worship Allah. That's the only reason. So here they are, in their tricks and machinations, taking people away from the worship of Allah. Who's the number one head of that team? Right? Shaitan. He's the captain of that team, or the coach or manager, whatever it is, depending on which sport it is that you follow, the president, prime minister, depending on which, if you're a republic or otherwise. He's the CEO, he's the chief rakah, he's whatever you want to call it. Right? So, and is he accursed? Yes or no? You don't know if his shaitan's accursed?
Yes.
Is he mal'oon? La'een, he's referred to as a mal'oon in the Qur'an. So whoever follows in that person's, that creation, that jinn's footsteps, they're going to have the same fate as that jinn has, that shaitan. وَاتَّقُوا فِتْنَةً لَا تَصِيبَنَّ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا مِنْكُمْ خَاصَّةً. What does he say in English?
And guard yourselves against the chastisement which cannot fall exclusively on those of you who do not do wrong. Alright,
so the fitna in that sense is, in Allah mentioned, أكبر من القتل وأشد من القتل. Allah has mentioned that fitna, basically the fitna is creating doubt. Basically to its lowest element, its basic form is the creation of doubt. And we discussed that a little bit last week as well. We said that's what the shaitan does. And in the time of Ramadan, there's no need to even consider that evil, that negativity. We should consider only positivity, because whatever we're receiving is from Allah. Or from our own egos, which is the second aspect of it. Excuse me. So, that actually in reality, that doubt, it applies to those who are oppressive. In reality, those who oppress others, in reality, the doubt they create is going to come back, and it's going to be the consequence of their actions. And unfortunately, the effect of their creation of doubt is going to come back to haunt them. They're going to be afflicted with their own actions, so to speak, in the end. And we have to be careful of the fitan that come. Okay, so that's what we'll do from the book. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رحم الله الإمام الحداد ونفعنا به وبكم رضي الله عنه وعنكم. So I think it'd be remiss for me not to mention something about what's happened recently, in this whole furor about what's going on. And look, I don't like to speak specifically about things that happen in the West, and like, as it's called, and I don't want to use the word the West. I want to use the word the white world. Okay, and they're the dominant established power at the moment. When the Muslims, when we were in power, we did things that I don't agree with either. Like, for example, the Muslims had to wear different, some places, there was the governors ruled, the Muslims had to walk in a particular place and the non-Muslims had to walk in a different place. Another one is, and this is ijtihadat, because we were in power. So the Muslims built their houses and the non-Muslims weren't allowed to build their houses higher than the houses of the Muslims, because there's some of the things. That's what happens when there's power. That's what happens when the establishment controls in that manner the people. Okay, so we had our turn. We did dhulm. Okay, we oppressed people. We're not perfect as human beings. And that's why Allah said, thank you very much, no more ruling for you, let's give the rule to somebody else. Okay, so we live in Australia, predominantly white country. Okay, and in my view, a racist country. That's my view. Because in first and foremost, what they did with the Aboriginal people, right? And we're a part of that because we're all part of it. And then secondly, White Australia policy. And look, I mean, that unfortunately is, that I think that racism is just taken from what happened with the British. That's what they did when they colonised countries, that took advantage of and oppressed the local people, the first peoples, the indigenous peoples, as whatever they're called. And that happened to us in our Muslim lands, the colonialisation that went there, the oppression, and in my view that continues. You know, I mean, the country that my parents are from, Lebanon, was only liberated in the 60s, independent, you know, so that effect is definitely there. And I don't mean that every Australian is racist, every white person, I mean the establishment is. And unfortunately I think we're seeing some signs of those things again. So, like I said, I'm loath against mentioning the atrocities that only happen in that regard, because it's an attachment. What it is, in my view, is an attachment of that establishment mentality to another establishment mentality in another country. So if it's a white, like for example, when France, when it happened and we condemn all that violence, we condemn all the people who do that. They're Muslim or not Muslim, it's haram. We don't approve of any of that stuff. You cannot kill an innocent person. It's haram. There's no conversation about that. There's no debate. That's what the ruling is, and we all have to accept it. And I personally am against any Muslim that does that, before any non-Muslim, because we know that's the case. We know that's the ruling. Okay, so for example, in France, when they happened in Paris, those attacks, innocent people, they were doing whatever they were doing. They're not Muslims. They could do whatever they want, and they went and shot them. And then the Harbour Bridge, and the Opera House went with the flag, and someone was talking with me. And the stories that I mentioned are not about me. They're stories to highlight things that maybe common conversations you might have, so you can pick ideas out of it, so you can use them, right? So you know how to talk and how to respond to what's going on around the world, the commonality of people's response. And then someone was saying to me, oh, you know what, and they all changed their Facebook and all that. And how don't you think it's horrendous what happened in Paris? I said, yeah, it's extremely horrendous. I said, unfortunately, and I mentioned this thing, I said, it's an establishment ideology. They're like, what do you mean? I said, well, on the same day there was a car bomb in Lebanon, or the day after, or the day before, I can't remember, the day before I think it was, and I didn't see the Lebanese flag on the Opera House. And they're all, but. I said, no, it's not a but, it's an and. We should, if we're really truly human beings, and that's what I bring it back down to. If we're really truly human beings and we care about our fellow human being, it doesn't matter if they're black or white. That one we're kind of dealing with in a way, except with the Aborigines. I take issue with that. I don't think we're doing a very good job with that. Okay, we're kind of dealing with the Asian, white, whatever. Okay, but it's come down to a religious aspect, or Middle East, or whatever the case might be. So why are we as Australians in a multicultural society, I heard the other day on the TV, they were saying, the Prime Minister was saying, we're the most successful multicultural country in the world. I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. Okay? We consider ourselves, then why is it that we can't put the Lebanese flag? The same day or the day before Orlando, 150 odd or 160 odd people got slaughtered in Kenya. We didn't even hear a drip of it. I didn't hear a drip of it. It wasn't mentioned anywhere. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't mention what happens in Orlando. And I'm not saying we shouldn't mention what happens in Paris. But what I'm saying is the establishment mentality that we have, that what it has become, in my view, what it has become is that if you're white like us, we associate with you and we mourn with you. If you're not white like us, and you're not, maybe Christian, maybe not, I don't know, but that's where I can see. Then we decide that we don't want to be involved in that, and we sweep that under the carpet. I think as Australians we're selling ourselves short in that regard. Certainly as Muslims, we should be as concerned for Syria and Lebanon and the different Muslim countries as we are for Orlando. Of course we should be. I'm not saying we shouldn't be. So don't take it that way at all. But they should be. They're all human beings. They're all human beings. And further to that, look, the fact that the incident that happened in Orlando was the people in that club there were gay or homosexual. I don't even like that. I don't like that personally. I don't like that word. That is the word they use. The people in the club were homosexual. So the context now has been swung back that Muslims are homophobic. No, we're not. We're not homophobic. We don't hate homosexual people. Our faith says that the only legitimate sexual relationship is between a husband and a wife. Full stop. Okay? A husband, there was a thing about slaves previously, but that's abrogated because there's no slaves exist anymore. And the whole world's agreed that we don't want slavery. And the Qur'an and the punishments for doing something wrong is to free a slave. Emancipation of slaves. So that's an old ruling. But the only legitimate relationship of a sexual nature that is permissible in our faith is between a husband, not a man and a woman, no, a husband and a wife. Full stop. Anything else our faith doesn't accept. That's what's in the Qur'an, and that's what's in the Hadith. And those rulings and those punishments are mentioned there, and we do not deny them. But what we do say, and that's not even relevant. One other thing is, it's not even relevant. Those apply to Muslims only. Anytime that, I implore you to note this, that anytime Sharia is mentioned, the first thing any of you should be saying is, Sharia applies only to Muslims. First and foremost. We do not, even if there was a Sharia law, it doesn't matter what the other non-Muslims are doing. They can live whatever lifestyle they like. It's nothing to do with us. Even they make their rulings about marriage and things their own. We have no problem with that. Okay? So that's an important thing. Whenever Sharia is mentioned, it does not apply to Muslims. That's the first thing you should be saying. Non-Muslims, excuse me. It only applies to Muslims. Okay? Second thing is, where is Sharia? Is it in Syria, in ISIL? No, it's not. Those guys, I mean, according to the reports that I hear, that's not Islam. Is it in Saudi Arabia? No, that's a kingdom. That's a monarchy. Where is it? Iran? No, it's not. They have their own, even though they're called the Islamic Republic, it's not Sharia, it's their own laws that they do. Some of them are Islamic and some of them aren't. But it's not Sharia. So it's a moot point, whatever the punishments may or may be, because it's inapplicable. And anyway, in any law, in any country, in any sovereignty through the history of time, no one has the right to take the law into their own hands. No one can do that. I can't go give people fines on the street for, I'd like to in Auburn sometimes, crossing WO lines and parking in the wrong places, especially when it's, Tarawih and people park across people's driveways, but I can't do that. I do not have the authority to do that. So considering there is no Islamic ruling, there's no country that's ruled or land that's ruled by Sharia, then there's no authority for anyone to apply those laws. If they are applied, it's under the sovereignty and the authority of that nation state. And whatever constitution or whatever whether it's a despotism or whatever it is that they've got there. So that's a moot point. But we do not hate anybody. We as Muslims, we said it before, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We are sent as a mercy, an empathy, a sympathy for all of humankind. And alameen doesn't just mean humankind. You know what alameen means? It means كُلْ مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ. Everything except Allah. That means animals, that means trees, that means water, that means soil. That's why we can't waste water. That's why even when we sleep at night, we put out fires. It's against the sunnah to keep a fire going at night when you sleep. So animals used to come and complain to the Prophet of Allah that they were being mistreated. And he used to punish the person that's doing it. So Islam does not breed any malice or hatred to homosexual people, heterosexual people, bisexual people, or any kind of asexual, whatever you want to call it, people. We don't have that. Okay, we as human beings might find it a bit, nishma'iz is the word in Arabic, we don't want to, we find it, we don't like those people's way of lifestyle, so we don't want to associate with them. But that's a personal issue I've got to deal with. How am I going to, we're just doing ma'ruf wa nahy al munkar, da'wah ila Allah. How am I going to invite people to Allah? How am I going to be example to the people of Allah? If these things happened, homosexuality happened at the time of the Prophet of Allah, bestiality happened at the time of the Prophet of Allah. I don't know why we're in this dream world that, things are so bad. I don't get it. I don't understand. And so that's the one point. We don't hate these people. We do not agree with their lifestyle, but in Islam, if they are not Muslims, they're free to do what they will. That's their la ikraha fi din. La ikraha fi din. And if they're Muslims, we call them to do what? And partake in the one sexual relationship that's permissible in Islam between a husband and a wife. Full stop. They want to, ahlan wa sahlan. They don't, what do? You know what we do? Okay? We just went through it, did we not? We just went through it. Okay? Hello, look, even the disassociation is in that regard, if they're going to be in a community where it's hard for them to meet other Muslims and things, then we should try and keep some contact for the niyyah of da'wah, for that reason only, to invite, that's it. And it's with hikmah, and it's with shafaq, it's with mercy, it's with empathy. We don't hate anyone. We're not allowed to hate anyone. It's not part of our deen. Whether we agree with that person, that lifestyle, or we agree with their thoughts or ideology, or their dress code, or their food choices, that's up to them. That's up to them. But we have to have that. The Prophet ﷺ, and when he saw the janazah of a non-Muslim, he started crying. They said, Ya Rasulullah, he's not Muslim. See, even the Sahaba used to think. He said, Tafallata minni. I didn't get a chance for his salvation. And that's what we're about, people's salvation. But that doesn't mean that we compromise our faith. We don't compromise our faith. That's what our faith says, and that's the only choice we have. I don't have it. Whatever I may think personally of what's in my faith, if I'm a true believer, or if I truly believe, more correctly, if I truly believe in Islam, that's the stance I have to take. On both sides. On both sides. I can't hate, and in terms of what people with their sexual relationships have to be in that manner, for those who are Muslims. And that's my belief. But that doesn't mean that I want other people to follow that belief. I'd like them to, but I'm not going to enforce my opinion on anybody. I'm not going to shove it down anyone's throat. And if they're happy with it, great. If they're not, I wake up in the middle of the night before Fajr and I pray. If I can't talk to them, if I can't convince them in a well-mannered, respectful, maybe not debate, but hiwar, meaning conversation. If I can't do that, and even if I do that, I still have to make dua, because only Allah can change the hearts. No one can control the hearts. They're bayna asbi'ay. They're between two fingers, the hearts of the Rahman subhanahu wa ta'ala, of Allah, the most merciful. And it's only He that can change them. That's why we ask Allah to give thabut, or tathbit to our hearts. Firmness and steadfastness to our hearts. So we know. So I don't want you just to take it. I want you to tell your friends. I want you to tell your neighbours, and Muslims I'm talking about. That is the attitude that we have to, and non-Muslims as well, to people who have different lifestyles to us. And that is the attitude that we have to our own faith. My understanding, there are some people calling for, like I said, we can't review the Qur'an, sorry. We don't have a papal edict. We can't go and say, oh, that was wrong. It doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, misfortunately, that's not how things work. All right, so there's a lot of tashwish of what's going around, and a lot of, things being said that, Islam doesn't suit Australian. No, of course it does. We're like anyone. So you're saying to me that anyone who disagrees with homosexuality as a lifestyle is un-Australian? No. But anyone who vilifies them, right? Anyone who persecutes them, anyone who discriminates against them, yes, it's un-Islamic and un-Australian. Both. Okay? But I can have my opinion. I'm entitled to it. And one of the tenets of the establishment, maqasid in terms of Islam, right, is that people should be able to speak freely, because otherwise, how are people going to realise the truth? But not blasphemously. To say, oh, Islam is this, and curse Islam or curse the Prophet. How does that increase people's understanding through free speech? That's like me coming and cursing someone's mum, or cursing in Australian sense the Anzacs, or the captain of the Australian cricket team. Maybe not so far, but okay. You with me? The vile language doesn't help free speech. Although in some contexts and some parts of the world, you can say whatever you want. How does that help people think freely? If the speech that's being said, in my view, and in view of a lot of the people who talk about the philosophy of free speech, if free speech doesn't lead to free thought, then there's no need to have it. If it doesn't lead for the ability for people, I remember in America when they came out with pornography, they said, it's under the, I think it's the First Amendment or Second Amendment, I can't remember which amendment it is of the Constitution, that people should that's an expression of free speech. But what does that add to the conversation of allowing people to think freely? Maybe it does, maybe there's something there, but I'm just raising the point that free speech in a lot of the philosophers, that's what it's for. And so Islam supports that. Because how are people going to come to a realization of the truth without being able to speak freely? If they're prevented from speaking, but without being blasphemous and without being, I suppose, vile in their speech. That vile and blasphemous speech does nothing. Like you see on F Muslims. What's that? F these people. The Aboriginals do this to them. What's that? That doesn't do anything to increase people's understanding of anything. All it does is make people angry. All it does is divide the community which we live in, divide the society which we live in. Al-Amr al-Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar is against that.